What would you do if you were just chilling in a park and the skies started shattering, opening a dimensional rift to a different plane? That's the dilemma that our MC found himself in when the supernatural struck the ancient city of Lin Tian. He was casually basking in the sun, sitting on a bench, and when he opened his eyes, the world he knew had already started crumbling down. Horrors beyond human comprehension broke through the fabric of reality and immediately unleashed chaos upon the human world. No one was spared. As long as you were in the vicinity, you were a target of death, mayhem, and destruction. The first instinct of any sane human was to run. Run as fast as possible, as far as their feet would take them, as long as it's away from this place forgotten by God. Our MC was a little late to the party. While the rest of the population was scrambling for their lives, he was stuck on the park bench, looking directly at the monstrosity. This was the day that the heavens opened and brought down devastation. The day that disaster came in the form of unspeakable horrors that would haunt anyone in their dreams. Death and despair spread throughout the city on an otherwise peaceful day. The monster turned the ground into a molten sea of lava, and the infrastructures around weren't spared. Mr. MC was frozen in fear. He held his phone in his hand. It was ringing with the incoming call from someone he calls Baby Xiao Xue. That day, the abyss was starving, and everything in sight was its rightful meal. Watching the monster stumble its way closer and closer to his position, while other people passed him by in a shared sense of panic, the only thought in MC's mind was that he couldn't afford to die here. Today was supposed to be a day of love, the day that he was going to meet his girlfriend after 3 whole years. Of all the days that the abyss could choose, it chose the most important day of his life. All their plans went down along with the entire city. Their anticipation burned to bits along with the bodies of innocent civilians. As the fire enveloped his whole body, scorching his skin and immolating his flesh and bones, the last thing on his mind was regret. He still had so many things he wanted to ask her girl, but it looks like that won't be possible as his entire being was vaporized senselessly. It seems like he's really going to die here. Miserable, afraid, and in agony, he still tried to reach his ringing phone. He reckoned that if all this BS hadn't happened on this special day, he would have been living the storybook life. A happy ever after with the woman of his dreams. His burnt body had been knocked around, strewn near the waters. It's a pity that he'll never get the chance to see her ever again. His hand touched the water, feeling its coldness to bring a semblance of relief before he passed. In the last second, before he breathed his final breath, a sliver of light escaped from his hand. The world had already forgotten when all of it really started. Aliens invaded the Earth silently, while strange events occurred more and more frequently. At the start, people just regarded them as rumors, hoaxes, or scams, at least until they were the ones in the middle of the unexplained phenomena. These kinds of events stretched back as far as 1934. In Dongchuan and Beihai, a giant dragon corpse fell from the sky. It overturned a fishing boat, but the gargantuan body inexplicably disappeared a day later. In 1947, a giant crab-like creature appeared on the west coast of the United States. Records state that it killed 15 people under the gaze of hundreds of witnesses. In more recent times, in 2020, a water monster was discovered in the southeastern region of the Dragon Kingdom. It appeared with a red full moon lighting up the sky at the same time. All of these events had something in common. They always disappeared overnight, as if they were never even there. Those incidents that caused fatalities are categorized and broadly labeled as man-made disasters. People were starting to be aware of these types of things. Some were theorizing what really happened to the ancient city of Litian for it to be destroyed overnight. People are even flocking to religion and prayers in fear of being next in line for devastation. Our MC started opening his eyes to a strange blue world, a gargled noise coming from above. It took some time to finally get a good look around him. He was seeing lily pads from their undersides. Bubbles were rising to the surface. Looking down, there were fins in place of where his hands were supposed to be. It took a little bit of time for things to finally click for him. At first, he cursed in disbelief. He scanned his body and concluded that he just turned into a freaking fish. What in Poseidon's name is happening here? As if fate was tempting him to get a closer look, he saw a piece of broken mirror lodged in the depths. He was already certain that he had turned into some kind of fish, a little carp to be exact. He had red scales, a pudgy body, and a mysterious red diamond gem on his forehead. While he was busy looking over his new form, the other fishes around him were going about their business without a care. This current bizarre situation got him thinking. He should be dead by now, right? The last thing he remembers seeing was the giant monster that invaded the city. Maybe being turned into a carp has something to do with the abyss. Another question floating in his mind was what happened to his girl, Xiao Xue? What happened to that monster that scorched his flesh and bones? He's so full of questions, and the only way to get to an answer is to go out there and have a look. The problem was that his current body and the situation overall were too restrictive. It would be great if he could leave this place first. Bad vibes were oozing all over the area. Feeling the predatory stare coming from behind him, it seemed like his senses were spot on. An army of crab-like beasts with their sharp pincers and steel-like carapace just happens to be fixated on the lone little carp. He tried to swim away to the best of his abilities, but his little fins could only do so much. The crabs were coming for him like he was the tastiest snack in the water. This death chase went on until he hit a literal dead end, as another beast prevented him from swimming any further. A massive body swam above the predators and the prey. It cast a shadow so massive that it seemingly covered what little light that could penetrate through the depths. It was a blue-scaled fish with sharp and strong teeth. It latched onto one of the tough-shelled crabs, and the rest scurried away like insects. Just like before, another massive shadow cast darkness on the depths. This time, however, it was even bigger and bulkier than the blue-scaled fish. It was a purple beast that dwarfed a blue scale, swiftly taking a bite out of the medium-sized predator. Its multiple eyes shone brightly like an anomaly straight out of the void. The little carp luckily found a dilapidated steel mailbox situated on the floor. Its size was just enough to serve as a hideout. Seeing how harsh the environment in this place was, he realized that the thought of leaving this place would be harder than he could have imagined. Forget about leaving the depths. Just staying alive among these incredulous beasts was already an insurmountable problem on its own. The fear of being eaten by a bigger and badder creature triggered a notification sound in his head. The invincible upgrade system is successfully activated. In front of his eyes, the water started bubbling with a magical light as it slowly formed some semblance of shape. When the magical light started to fade, it was replaced by a bountiful flesh scantily covered by a golden brazier. Her hair was bluer than the ocean, her limbs more luscious than the most precious pearls. An upper body of a human, more like a goddess really. Her lower body took the form of a tail with the scales of a marine creature, the most beautiful mermaid I've ever seen for real. Little Carp just had a blank look on his face, asking her what she was supposed to be. The mermaid goddess didn't respond with words. She just took him by his little red fin and started bolting away at the speed of sound. The ride alone almost killed the poor guy from the sheer pressure and speed. They zoomed through bountiful marine life with only one destination in mind. The kind-hearted mermaid goddess brought the little carp to a more fitting venue away from the fearsome, oversized beasts. The shallow waters. Now that they're here, he asked about her identity once again. Scratch that. Maybe the more fitting question was, what in the world is she? She simply introduced herself as the little carp's system, but I'll continue calling her mermaid goddess because that's what she deserves. Miss Mermaid Goddess kindly opened up our MC's status window. His name was Lin Hao, a level 1 black koi. 3 centimeters in length and 0.4 grams heavy. Combat power at 0.1. No skills, no supernatural power, no evolution points, no drip, nor riz, no hose. If that's the case, then how can he upgrade? How can he go from a useless fish to one that can at least survive? The mermaid goddess's solution to that problem was quite simple. Lin Hao just has to eat. So, he followed her instructions and ate the first piece of loose crumbs he saw floating in the water. Devouring that breadcrumb gave him a whopping 0.1 evolution points, proving that he can evolve just by consuming things. He stared blankly at the personification of his system. Then Lin Hao proceeded to go on a feeding frenzy as breadcrumbs started raining from above. Looking down from above, this body of water appears peaceful and tranquil, especially beneath the soft light of the night sky. Below, Lin Hao had just finished gorging himself with whatever he could get his mouth on. He even had a cute little bump on his stomach from working so hard. The last session was particularly grueling, but it only granted him 5 evolution points. Miss Mermaid Goddess just casually laid down on the pond floor, watching his every move. Lin Hao was starting to feel that he was getting scammed here. Is it really appropriate to add these little evolution points after he put in so much effort to eat? After that brief break from filling himself up, other mindless fishes joined in on the free breadcrumbs raining from above. Although he was pretty full now, Lin Hao couldn't let all those unremarkable extras get all the nutrients from these precious crumbs. He swam, turned, twisted his body, and chomped, not letting a single piece of bread get past him. He only got half an evolution point for doing all those tricks, but that was plenty enough. Now that he thought of it, who in the world was feeding fish in the middle of the night? The answer to that question might be a lot closer to his heart than he could ever imagine. It was a woman, longingly looking at a locket containing a photo of herself and a young man who looked exactly like Lin Hao back when he still had limbs and didn't have scales. That's right. It was his baby, Xiaoxue. She was still devastated by the events that took her lover's life away just when they were so close to seeing each other again. As her tears clouded the lens of her glasses, she recalled the last promise that he gave her. Lin Hao swore that he would wait for her to come back no matter what. Lin Hao the carp stayed near the water's surface out of curiosity and heard his name being uttered by the woman. At first, he just thought that the grieving woman's husband had the same name as him or something. Xiaoxu was so distraught and distracted that the sentimental locket in her hand accidentally slipped. Seeing the last piece of her lover's memory literally slip through her fingers made her panic immensely. She tried to catch it, but gravity had already done its thing. The locket was heading over the railing and into the water. All the fish, including Lin Hao, got out of the way in fear of getting bonked by the incoming metal. This unfortunate incident just made Xiaoxue cry and suffer even harder than she already was. But there was not enough time to be down in the dumps. A man came up to her respectfully referring to Xiaoxue as team leader Luo. It sounded like they had somewhere else to be urgent. She wiped her tears as if they weren't there in the first place. Team leader Luo put her glasses back on and her voice turned stern. Turning away from the railing to the shallow waters, Xiaoxue needed to continue her life. She reassured Lin Hao not to worry, for she would come and find him when everything was over, even if the search took her to the ends of the world. In the water, the locket accidentally opened mid-fall, and the little carp saw the photo inside the thing. It was him and the love of his life, Xiaoxue. Connecting the dots, the one who dropped this locket and the one feeding the fish of the shallows bread was his girl. Lin Hao desperately swam up with every strength that his tiny body could muster. He prayed that Xiaoxue didn't do anything stupid. He was almost there. He could already see the light of the night sky peering through the surface and the departing figure of the woman of his dreams. When he finally broke through the water to profess that he was still alive, that he was Lin Hao, Xiaoxue was already gone. So close, yet so far. The little fish had never felt more dejected than now. Crying his eyes out with snot cascading from his nose, the little carp was starting to realize just how troublesome it was not to be able to speak. He just couldn't live without his baby. How could he survive without Xiaoxue? Wait, she might be gone. But the locket pocket watch was still descending to the depths of the shallow water. Lin Hao changed course and headed down to the uncharted waters of the shallows. The creatures at this level were considered extremely deadly for a fish of his size. Each one of them could probably gulp him down like he was doing with all those breadcrumbs. But that pocket watch was a token of love between him and his girl. He must get it back no matter what. But realistically speaking, he was just way too weak to do it right now. It was frustrating, but it was the truth. He could only ask fate just why it kept playing tricks on them. Why did they always miss each other by a hair's breadth? Wiping his fish tears away, he steeled his resolve not to succumb to the insurmountable challenge. He would do everything in his power to get out of the water, hoping that by then, Xiaoxue would still be waiting for him to come back. Lin Hao dove back into the shallows. The surface water returned to its quiet and empty tranquility. Not far from that peaceful surface, life of all sizes was roaming around, governed by their instincts. But there was one particular anomaly that was operating beyond his physical needs. A fish with the willpower of a desperate man, eating everything that moved and could provide nutrition. Lin Hao graduated from free breadcrumbs to eating smaller fishes and crustaceans to level up at an astonishing rate. The mermaid goddess quietly watched him gorge himself with seafood. In her experience as the personification of the system, those blessed usually stayed alone for the first few days. This was the first time that she had seen a fish so diligent to get stronger from the very beginning. Lin Hao was so blazing fast that another notification had already dinged in his head. A prompt stated that the host had met the evolution conditions. He could evolve right here and right now. He still didn't know what this evolution thing did, but the prompt demanded a simple yes or no answer. He had to choose. Of course, the natural course of action was to choose yes and cash in on his hard work. A magical light shone beneath his tail as a qualitative change started taking place inside his tiny body. As for the answer to his question regarding what evolution could do, Miss Mermaid Goddess just answered that everything was possible. It took a while. It must have taken the whole night for the evolution to conclude. Lin Hao must have lost consciousness in the middle of all the changes happening in his fish body. When he opened his eyes, he felt a whole lot different from before. Miss Mermaid Goddess had been watching over him the entire time, making sure that the evolution process went smoothly. He was just a little freaked out to see her inquisitive gaze first thing after waking up. Miss Mermaid Goddess was quite puzzled that Lin Hao took so long to upgrade when this was just supposed to be the first evolution. Lin Hao was not quite sure either, but he was certain that his body felt a little longer and his scales a lot thicker than they were. He was not that pudgy little carp anymore. He had gained a little more splendor. Miss Mermaid Goddess asked him what body part of his got longer. If she asked me that, I would have folded. But Lin Hao was a fish, so his body was pretty much the only thing that could develop. Looking at his status window, he had already reached level 3. His body was 45 centimeters long, weighing 4 kilos. Combat power was at 1.2, and he gained the power tail rack and steel scale armor skills. Still no supernatural powers, and his evolution threshold had expanded to 200 points. The standout among that wall of text was the appearance of 2 new skills. Lin Hao was not expecting that addition at all. The mermaid goddess explained that for 3 seconds, the scales on his whole body would become as hard as steel. But it was a 10-second cooldown. A shield after every 10 seconds sounded quite powerful. While they were discussing the skills, a commotion started not far from their position. It was the typical rule of nature, survival of the fittest, and those that fell got predated upon. This time, a massive fish had fallen against a coalition of different marine life. They feasted on the creature's lifeless body without mercy. It might be a grisly scene, but Lin Hao saw it as an opportunity to test some things out. The first fish that sensed his incoming presence already knew that the new and improved Lin Hao was bad news. The evolved carp immediately proved that conjecture by tail-slapping 2 bigger creatures into oblivion. He went from being free food into a carp that could hold its own against other predators. Lin Hao wasn't done yet. While everyone else was distracted with eating what little meat they could get from the dying massive fish, the carp was dealing free hits from left and right. It seemed like one-shotting these bastards got him feeling a little overconfident. A gargantuan beast with its sharp fangs came out of nowhere, aiming to make him a scrumptious lunch. But Lin Hao was not going to fall that easily. He turned around without a hint of fear. His eyes exuded a calm and collected confidence. This was the perfect opportunity to test his other skill, the one that gives him an overpowered shield every 10 seconds. His body shone brightly, indicative of a borderline invincible scales. The sneaky predator that dared to take him by surprise was going to need a fish dentist to fix those messed up teeth. It had only been a day, and Lin Hao had already made a ton of progress with regard to strength. He was quite pleased with himself. Seeing him dominate the shallow waters, the mermaid goddess started doling out quests. His ordinary task was to swallow 100 black shell shrimps, and the reward would be an improved night vision ability. The difficult task, on the other hand, demanded that he devour a mutated creature, and the reward would be a random skill. With the existence of possible quests, he couldn't help but wonder just what the finish line for this devouring evolution was. She added that the rewards given after succeeding in these missions could be far more impressive. Thinking of just how impressive these rewards could be, he asked her if there was a reward that could make him human again. Miss Mermaid Goddess reiterated what she had been saying since the start. With the system in place, everything was virtually possible. Understanding those words gave Lin Hao a newfound hope. Since it was technically possible for him to become human again, the priority should be to get that token of his and Xiao Xue's love, the pocket watch on the pond floor. But going back to the depths and the horrors that lurked within would be a Herculean task. A multitude of creatures that could kill him easily were hidden all over the place. The mermaid goddess gravely warned him that rushing into the deep water in his current state would be tantamount to suicide. He would surely die. Lin Hao didn't listen. He just wanted to be left alone for a little bit. After a while, he managed to sneak past the immediate threats, reaching the deep floor and hiding behind some kelps. It was now or never. A great opportunity just presented itself as all the big fish had momentarily dispersed away from the pocket watch. He steadily made his way to the trinket, trying his best not to get noticed by the passing predators. As he got closer and closer to the pocket watch, the only thing on his mind was his beloved Xiao Xue. He was so tunnel-visioned to take what's rightfully his that he failed to notice a glaring problem with his sly plan. The big fish had dispersed away from the area because they were afraid of the slumbering, enormous hunter in the area. Lin Hao stopped in his tracks, seeing the scale of the monster in front of him. He could not help but feel the exact same feeling as when he was in Lintian Ancient City. The mermaid goddess had to bail him out of that grave situation, scolding Lin Hao for rushing into danger without a proper plan of action or any thoughts. He looked like a child getting reprimanded. He felt so powerless that he couldn't even retrieve something so important to him. For some reason, his thoughts wandered towards his previous life with Xiao Xue. Back in those days, he was consumed with work all the time, but he was happy living with the love of his life. She had always loved his look when he was consumed with concentration. Sometimes Xiao Xu would interrupt him lovingly, telling him that she was hungry or something. He's the type of guy who would drop everything he's doing to ask his girl what she wants to eat. That day was Noodles Day. He made her a scrumptious hot meal ready to be devoured, and he even added an egg on top. He cheerfully brought the hearty meal to their room, urging Xiao Xue to dig in. When she didn't respond the first time, a bad feeling started creeping in. Xiao Xue was gone. Nowhere in sight. Lin Hao was left hanging with a bowl of noodle soup made with love in hand. Mermaid Goddess had to wake him up from his stupor. He didn't know why his thoughts drifted towards that day. Lin Hao just shook his head and assured the system that it was nothing. She conjured up a water projection of the pocket watch and stated that if he wanted something, he'd have to fight hard for it. All he can do now is work hard to devour and evolve. He touched the water-conjured pocket watch, and it dissolved into nothing. It will take a while before he can retrieve the real one. Deep inside, he already knew that what she'd been telling him was right. The direction that the mermaid goddess gave him added a much-needed boost to morale. He's just hyped to grind and evolve. He started experimenting with the various sea creatures in the shallows. The first one on the list was the massive conches mucking about on the pond floor. He could swear that these things weren't supposed to be so big. For the sake of finding out what works and what doesn't, he shoved the whole conch into his mouth. He tried to bite into it, but the shell was just too tough to break. It just wasn't worth it to go through all that trouble right now. Lin Hao immediately spats the conch out in disgust. It was basically inedible. Even though there were a ton of them on the pond floor, he couldn't really devour them for evolution points. It was just another source of frustration. This just discouraged him from his mission even more. If he can't bite through a conch, then he can only snack on fish for now. It might take him forever to evolve at this point. Let's take a break from what's happening underwater and look at the shores. A heavy-duty and fully equipped vehicle just pulled up next to the beachfront, and by the looks of their equipment, it seemed like they meant some serious business. It was Xiao Xue, also known as Team Leader Luo, and her subordinates. Their destination was supernatural in nature. It was a draconic corpse that washed up on the beach. Authorities have cordoned off the area, but no one has a clue what to do just yet. Even the team leader's subordinate hasn't seen something like this. The creature looked like it came from the depths, but there were no records of an animal of this size and appearance. It's a curious mystery for some, but not for Xiao Xue. She immediately bolted out of the car after seeing the beast. She ordered all personnel to start the evacuation procedures and maintain a hefty distance from the creature. The team leader warned them that this thing could explode at any moment now. Have you ever heard of cases of whale explosions? There have been instances of whales exploding due to the excessive accumulation of putrid gases during the decomposition stage of whale corpses. With a big enough size, it is without a doubt one of the deadliest natural bioweapons in the world. The same principle could be applied to this washed-up giant on the beach. Xiao Xu hurriedly donned some minimal protective gear and instructed her men to prepare the ventilation pipes. She used a standard scalpel to cut through the corpse's thick and slimy flesh. Using the incision, the ventilation pipe was promptly inserted. Now that the pipes are connected, it should lessen the probability of the worst-case scenario happening. The one in charge of monitoring the corpse's status hurriedly informed her that something was off. Despite lessening the stress with the ventilation pipes, the scanners were giving them error readings. Team leader Luo realized that this could only mean one thing and mandated that everyone gets away from the site. Her men weren't too quick on the uptake, so she had to simplify the orders. Everyone must run for their lives. She had to drag away the wimpy scanner guy from the impending explosion as the beast carcass started to exhibit imminent signs of explosion. Just like she expected, it was a gory mess of an eruption. Putrid blood, bile, and liquefied organs blasted all over the beach. Seeing that disgusting sight must have been too much for some, so let's head back to the tranquil shallow waters. Terrifying shrimps have made the shallow floors their turf with their numbers. But that's about to change because a new predator has just arrived in town. Lin Hao has been devouring blackshell shrimps for 1 evolution point a pop. Their meat isn't bad. The shells are nice and crunchy, and they net more evolution points than fish scraps. He has hunted so many of these things that he unlocked the Black Shell Shrimp Hunter achievement, granting him a normal treasure chest. Even Miss Mermaid Goddess was shocked that Lin Hao had already devoured over 200 of those water cockroaches. The achievement system gifted him with the choice to open the normal chest immediately, and he took it. A magical chest started manifesting in the hands of the Mermaid Goddess. When it opened, its mystical contents started enveloping Lin Hao's body. Strength up, bubble blast, resilient fins, agility up, critical up, defense up, stamina up, and many more options started appearing before his eyes. Among the many choices, the one that stood out to Lin Hao the most was the razor-sharp teeth upgrade. That would be a pretty neat spec to invest in. Right? Well, it's a reward after all. There's no reason for it to be bad or anything. Miss Mermaid just watched from the sidelines, and when the confirmation was finalized, she excitedly urged him to show what upgrade he chose. Her eyes were practically shining in anticipation. Wasn't she supposed to be the personification of the system? She should be fully aware of what he chose, right? However, she explained that perk rewards are pulled out randomly. Not even the system can direct or manipulate those choices. Lin Hao eagerly awaited as the selected rewards started taking effect. The first thing that he noticed was that this perk gave him an intense feeling of itchiness. He swam in circles, trying to alleviate the itch, but it was of no help. It was so uncomfortable that he needed something to grind his teeth against. The first thing he saw was the conches strolling on the floor slowly. The thing that he couldn't break just hours before was crushed in a single bite without any resistance. He hurriedly swam back to Miss Mermaid to show her the upgrade. He flashed his teeth and asked her opinion on its appearance. Seeing the grotesque and overgrown fangs, she just skirted around the obvious answer by stating that this was outside of his field of expertise, so no comment. It might look a little odd, but the razor-sharp teeth perk was an extremely useful one when it comes to hunting. Lin Hao could easily hunt schools of fish now. It's just his bad luck that the most bountiful group of fish here, the dark ones, tasted awful. Concerning his other quest, he could only imagine how a mutated creature would taste like. This brings up the question of what even counts as a mutated creature. Maybe those are organisms that underwent mutation because of polluted water. He asked the mermaid goddess if these quests are generated on conditions that are possible to fulfill in the current environment, or if they're also randomly generated. The system herself doesn't know the answer to that. If the former was true, then it means that there's a mutated creature in this pond, the same kind as the one that killed him as a human. While Lin Hao was deep in thought, he felt a covert presence sneakily moving around him. He quickly turned around to see what was up, but there was nothing there. He could not see what was lurking in the dark, but he just felt a chill running up his spine. And then he heard some human voices from above. They were plotting to release some pleco fish into the wild, knowing full well that it's illegal and harmful. From their boat came dozens of flecko fish finding their new home on these peaceful waters. Lin Hao was angered to see some demons releasing an invasive species right into the wild, right into his home. Just as the flecko fish were about to acclimate to their surroundings, a presence from below started stretching to the surface. A massive creature just saw the travesty up above and decided to make a move. It was a serpentine creature whose length could stretch from the depths to the surface, and it looked pissed. Warning signs started blaring through Lin Hao's system. It was a threat alert sensing the appearance of a highly dangerous creature. The system urged Lin Hao to prepare for combat.